And welcome into this week's edition of the Yinziders podcast. I'm Jenna Harner. He's the Athletics' Mike DeFabo. And Mike, the road is getting narrow. It is crazy to think that we have 6 games left in the regular season here. Steelers sit at 6-5. The AFC in itself just feels like this big jumbled mess compared to the NFC, who everybody's good over there. No one really knows who is actually good in the American Football Conference. Last week, though, the game in Chicago against the Bears really felt like the Steelers had to have it. They did not. And now this is kind of another massive week for them. Mike Tomlin was asked on Tuesday about, hey, do you look at this as the playoff start now type of thing? And he said, well, it's kind of always how I look at things. But this week feels like a playoff game for the Steelers. And I don't entirely know what we're going to get from this team. How many times have we said that this year, though?
Yeah, it feels like a division that had been slipping away from the Steelers for weeks finally and officially changed hands on Sunday. Both the Ravens and the Steelers are now 6-5. And so, the Athletic has a playoff simulator, and Jenna can attest to this. I'm addicted to playoff simulations, and I have spent much more time than I care to admit analyzing the different scenarios. And basically, my bottom line conclusion after way too much time spent there is Steelers need to get to 10-7 or they need to sweep the Ravens. That makes it either this is a must-win game against the Bills. If they win this game, they're okay. If they lose this game, it's looking pretty bleak, and it's looking like they're going to have to sweep the Ravens to get in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I felt like it was trending toward this at this point. When the Steelers started out with that really hot lead in the division, I think they had a 4-game lead? Is that about right? 3 and a half?
Not 4-game lead. They were 4-1, and the Ravens were either 1-4, 1-5.
Yeah, so it was a 3-game lead, and then both teams since then have it's been completely the opposite from what we've seen. Let's talk this week particularly, because I think the biggest storyline, the biggest thing we're keeping an eye on, the biggest thing to pay attention to is Aaron Rodgers. And it seems like he's going to play, but you've had a big question kind of since we found out that he was not going to get the start in Chicago when Mike Tomlin said that pregame.
Yeah, so he's dealing with some type of a fracture in his left wrist. Well, a broken bone takes weeks, plural, to heal. So his wrist was broken against Cincinnati. It was still broken against Chicago. It's still going to be broken this week. Like, I feel like sometimes we get into this football, science, medical philosophy where we feel like, oh, a guy has a gunshot wound, just sit him out for a week and he'll be good to go next week. That's not how things work. And so it's been confusing to me to hear Mike Tomlin explain it, because after the injury occurred, a few days later on Tuesday, Mike Tomlin said, well, Aaron Rodgers doesn't really need a lot of practice because he's such a veteran. Well, Aaron Rodgers practiced more than anticipated. He was supposed to not really practice until Friday, Mike Tomlin said on Tuesday. Rodgers was out there on Thursday as a limited participant. On Friday, he took some first-team reps. Not all of the first-team reps, but some. And so why were you giving him any first-team reps if he wasn't going to play? And why did you not play him if next week it's not going to be any different? So after the game, Mike Tomlin was asked, I asked him, I said, well, what's – because he immediately said Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to play against the Bills. And I said, well, what's going to be different in 7 days? And he said that he would get more practice time and more preparation. And it just, to me, doesn't make any sense, because who was the person that held Aaron Rodgers out? Mike Tomlin. And so to me, it just feels like they probably gambled. They probably thought, okay, the Bears are missing a ton of linebackers. They're not very good at stopping the run. The Steelers probably were thinking to themselves, okay, Mason can do just enough, and they can lean into the running game and those heavy personnel packages and get the job done. But that was a tremendous gamble that the Steelers made, because that was essentially a playoff game. This is essentially a playoff game coming up. And so I understand that, maybe the only justification is they felt like it was too big of a risk, and maybe Rodgers could have suffered further injury that could have completely ended the season. At this point, you have to throw caution to the wind. You
Yeah.
have to say, look, if the Steelers don't win this week, there is no tomorrow. So you have to play for today. You have to play Aaron Rodgers.
And I think I heard you mention this on the radio earlier this week. It was something we talked about here on WPXI on the Final Word. If Aaron Rodgers plays in that game, I think the Steelers win that game against the Bears. I think they win that game if Aaron Rodgers is playing quarterback, regardless of everything that's been going on with his wrist.
Yeah, he gives them a much more significant chance.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the biggest concern with Aaron Rodgers playing with a broken wrist would have been ball security, because taking a snap under center might have been impossible. He would have probably had to operate out of the pistol formation. And then ball handling, specifically handing the ball off when the running back is to his right. Typically, he would turn to his right and hand off with his left hand. He may have had to make some alterations. Maybe he would have been able to hand the ball off using only his right hand to both sides. So, but you saw the concern come to fruition with Mason Rudolph turning the ball over twice, including fumbling it.
Yeah.
And I felt like Mason's final completion percentage doesn't tell the whole story. They really babied Mason in a lot of ways. A lot of his completions were screens, pop passes, quick completions. And then when he tried to attack downfield, he was either off target or missed open guys or didn't see guys running open over the middle of the field. I know there was a big discussion this week about not using the middle of the field. Part of that's game planning and part of that's play design. The other part is I think Mason was missing these guys. There were guys that were open over the middle of the field, and he wasn't hitting them. So I just feel like it was a kind of a stupid argument to begin with. I think that at any point in life, Aaron Rodgers greater than Mason Rudolph. I don't care about age. I don't care about injury. Aaron Rodgers is better than Mason Rudolph, period, end of discussion. And I think that the Steelers kind of gambled by, it would have been a gamble to play an injured quarterback, but it was also a gamble to start your backup in a game that you needed to win.
Yeah, I truly couldn't agree more with that. This week does feel really intriguing to me because we're obviously not going to dive too much into what the Bills do. We'll leave that for our next segment with the Athletics' Tim Graham. But the Bills do not defend the run well. And the Steelers are coming off a game. And yes, you can look at Chicago and say they were missing they were missing 3 of their starting linebackers. Other guys got injured during the game. This was not the defensive core that Chicago has had success or has, had a lot of their star players playing. But the Steelers ran the ball very, very well in this game. It was probably their best. It was their best game running the ball. It was their best yardage output. Statistically, this feels like that has to continue here this week because I was talking about this with Chris Carter earlier this week. I loved how ahead of the chains the Steelers were staying on some of their early drives because Kenneth Gainwell, Jalen Warren were popping off 8-9 yard runs on first down, setting yourself up for second and short. How many times have we heard this offense talk about wanting to get to that point to really be able to get to the explosive plays that they want to make?
Yeah, I think Mike Tomlin in his press conference on Tuesday mentioned that they had, I think, 7 third and short situations, and they converted 6 of them. And so I think that going into this week, similar game plan. I think that, it's stupid to say. It's like, I want to start making a joke. I almost did this on Twitter where every week just put keys to the game, establish the run, stop the run, win the turnover battle.
Yeah, it's the same.
It's funny because people always say it, but it's also true. But you look at this game, I think if the Steelers are able to run the ball, there should be opportunity to run the football against a Bills defense is not very great at stopping the run. And then on the flip side, I think that stopping the run is going to allow them to really pin their ears back, get to Josh Allen. And so I feel like the ground game, we're getting into, it's going to be one of the last days of November. We're getting into November and late November, early December football. And that's when football does turn in to smash mouth, old school football that Yinziders love. Open your Iron City.
Keep it coming. I need more of this. The people want this. The people, they've been asking for the Yinzer accent from Mike DeFabo.
Go downtown, drive down the field, give the ball to the bus. Yeah, it's this time of year that my dad starts saying things like, man, the Steelers really just need a running back like the bus again.
Mm-hmm. It's true. But I do think that we have the identity the Steelers have wanted to have offensively all season. I think they've gotten to that. I don't think we've seen a perfect version
they've started.
of it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that they've just been they're just so inconsistent in so many areas, including running the ball, because like you go back to like it seemed like week 4 when they started doing the Spencer Anderson phenomenon that now has become a phenomenon. That's when it felt like the running game was picking up steam, but it's still been a bit inconsistent. I give Arthur Smith credit because I did like the new wrinkle using Spencer Anderson as a fullback. I think that that's been effective. But I've been stalling,
fake tush push,
which they had been practicing at least this week, maybe last week, and Arthur Smith kind of hinted that it was coming. But okay, here's what I was stalling for time while I was doing that, Jenna. I actually went into the Jenna Harner Stats and Information Department, and the Steelers still are only averaging 4 yards per carry, which is 23rd in the league. And I think that kind of speaks to everything with the Steelers. Like, because this should be a strength. This should be the strength. They should be top 10 in this. They hired Arthur Smith, who's who's a guy who's known for coordinating rushing offenses. You know, they went out and they invested in the offensive line. One of the few signings they had was a running back. They used a 3rd-round pick on Caleb Johnson. There should be enough there to have a reliable running game. And for the Steelers right now to be, bottom 3rd of the league in running, like on a per carry basis, just is so underwhelming. But I think that's the story right now of the 6-5 Steelers.
Yeah.
Is you invest in the offensive line, you hire a coordinator who's supposed to be all about the run game. You give him 2 tight ends that are 2 of the top 10 highest paid tight ends, and yet this offense doesn't do much. You invest all this money in the defense. You double down on defense. After last year, I think that there was a legitimate argument to say the Steelers had for 3 years employed the NFL's highest paid defense. They tried to win that way in the 2020s, and it just did not work. Okay? And instead of acknowledging that or pivoting or going a different direction, they doubled down. They said, okay, Terrell Austin, we're going to keep you. And not only are they keeping Terrell Austin, they are spending more money because Jalen Ramsey costs more than Minkah Fitzpatrick. They spent $10 million on a 34-year-old Darius Slay who's stealing money basically because he's always injured and pretty average at his age. To the point that a former no-name undrafted guy, James Pierre, steals his job last game. They gave TJ Watt a humongous contract. They added incentives to Cam Hayward's contract. They did all of these things to double down on what they had already failed doing. And you could say that they did the same thing and expected different results and got the same 10-7, 9-8 season that they always have.
I think, to me, the way I've been describing this team lately is a 2-word phrase: consistently inconsistent. That's what we've seen from this team. You look at the month of November up to this point: win, loss, or actually loss, win. Yeah, loss, win, loss. However, however it's shaken out. There we go. But to me, that is who this team is. That is what we've seen from this team. I think one of the things that's trending in their favor is that when you look at the AFC as a whole, there are very few teams that you can point to and say, these are contenders. These are very good teams. I think I honestly, a lot of looking at the AFC as a whole, to me, I'm like, this team, the Colts look good, but the Broncos look good, but, and I know that that's life in the NFL, but to me, that just feels like that does play in the Steelers' favor, but it also does not, with how crowded things are in the AFC playoff picture right now and how crucial these final 6 games of the season, this gauntlet stretch we talked about at the start of the year when the schedule came out was going to be. Does it entirely look like a gauntlet stretch right now? I don't think the Bills are what they've been in years past, but you still have Josh Allen. So I think there's still, this is still a massive test for them there. I think Detroit looks more beatable than usual, but they're also the Lions, and they have a very good offense when they're consistent. So to me, this stretch is going to be very, very interesting for the Steelers. And I want to say we're going to learn a lot, but I don't know if we are going to learn a lot about this team.
I think we have learned a lot about the Steelers. I think we've learned that their defense is either forces 5 turnovers or gives up 30 points. They've given up 30 points 5 or more 5 times. They've forced 5 or more turnovers twice. There's not a lot in between that. And then offensively, I think they are a team with tremendous limitations. I think that they're a team that if they run the ball reasonably effectively, if Aaron Rodgers is efficient on his short, quick passes, if DK Metcalf creates yards after catch, they can cobble together enough to put some points on the board. But if they're in 3rd and long situations, it's a disaster. Rodgers doesn't throw the ball downfield, and if he does, he's not throwing the ball downfield well. Mm-hmm. And he also just doesn't have playmakers to go to. If it's not going to DK Metcalf, there's no receiver that you trust right now. As much as I love Calvin Austin as a guy, I want him to succeed because he's a nice guy. He's really underwhelmed. He's been injured multiple times, and he hasn't taken advantage of this true opportunity to be a legitimate number 2 wide receiver. So I think they kind of just are what they are. The weird thing, like to your previous point though, Jenna, I would give the Steelers, okay, so like The Athletic has this like little model thing, and they gave him like an 18% chance to make the playoffs, according to the nerd that put together the spreadsheet or whatever. I think that I give them more like 30% chance to make the playoffs. If they were to get in, I might give them a 50% chance to win that game. Like, I think it's going to be more challenging to make the playoffs because their backs to the wall and they need to win 4 of 6. But if you need to win 1, I think that's more of a coin flip in this AFC. They're just such a weird team because the Patriots are atop the AFC with 10-2. The Steelers have beaten the next 2 best team, or the 2 of the. They beat the Patriots.
Yeah, they beat the Patriots. Are they 9-2 or 10-2?
10-2, I think.
I think they're 9-2. Unless did I say that wrong earlier this week? Let's do a little fact check, just because.
They're 10-2.
I'm nervous about it. They're 10-2. They're 10-2. Yeah. Okay. I thought they were. You know what? I said that last week. That's why. What day is it? I said I think the Patriots get to 10 wins, but I couldn't remember if I said that this week or last week. That's where I'm at right now.
So basically the point is the Steelers are the weirdest team. And I think that they also are what they've been for a while. Like, what the Steelers are a team that does a reasonably good job of beating the teams they should beat. They stay competitive, and usually the Steelers beat the teams they should beat, except for 1. Usually they lose to the teams that are going to beat them, except for 1. And then every other game in the middle is a coin flip, and that leaves you right around 10-7. Like, I think that that's just who the Steelers have been for a while now. And I think that now there's more and more that enter that coin flip conversation. And I don't think they do enough, and they have enough that they could say, the Steelers can't say, they're really, really good at this. They're really good at that. They're really good at this. To have some kind of an identity and a brand of football that they know they can win. Their only brand of football that they know they can win is when TJ Watt puts on a cape and like forces a couple turnovers, and it's just a turnover fest. If it's not that, then they end up in these, medium to high scoring games that half of them they win, half of them they lose.
Mm-hmm. And I have a feeling there are going to be some turnovers this week, but I also think it's going to be that same thing, that medium, high scoring, high 20s, low 30s, both teams. And it's a 3-point game. Vegas has this as, when we're recording this, I believe, is a 4.5-point game. I think it's going to be a little closer than that. It feels like a true field goal game, but I Josh Allen is such a weapon to me that I know that he's had not the MVP season he was coming off of a season ago, but at the end of the day, he's still Josh Allen. He can still make those superhero type plays. It's gonna be a fun one. Gonna be a fun one.
It is. Should we jump into our interview with Tim Graham?
That sounds wonderful. Stick with us here on the Insiders. We will be right back, and then we will bring you the interview with the Athletics' Tim Graham, who was actually just in Pittsburgh, has some restaurant recommendations. Stay tuned. This is the Insiders. And welcome back to the Yinziders podcast. We are now joined by senior writer for The Athletic, Tim Graham. Tim, thank you so much for taking some time. And it's really funny because both of us know you in different ways. Obviously, you and Mike work at the same company. I know you from my short time in Buffalo covering the Bills, working at Channel 4 up there. So one, we are so honored to have you here on the show, but you were just in Pittsburgh, I believe this past weekend?
I was on a scouting mission, and I had no idea that it was, I don't know what the event is called, but all the trees being lit
Light Up Night.
all light up night. And I stayed at a hotel in which all the roads were blocked, and it was fabulous. I have to say, I love crowds. I'm a big tree lighting guy. I love not being able to drive my car and having to walk several blocks away to get an Uber. Yeah, it was fantastic.
And you also went to dinner, though, at a nice place.
But before I get to that, I also want to just, with a nice bow, since it is Christmas time and it was light up night, I enjoyed the stench of urine that I had to step over several times down in what you call the cultural district. And I didn't know if that was like some sort of biomedical culture, like you're somebody scraping some DNA off of it. But yeah, that was good. No, but it's beautiful. Pittsburgh's one of my favorite cities. I kid because I care. I love the PPG building and that area down there. Anyways, it's just cool. The architecture. And thanks to your recommendation, I got in at Altius and had a wonderful meal there. Had caviar for the first time in my life. I figured at the age of 54, I was going to invest just to find out. If I spit it out, then at least I knew. But I've always wondered if I was going to like caviar, and I did the whole thing.
Yeah, and they harvest that right out of the lawn. So it's fresh. It's the freshest
right?
Caviar in town. Yeah. Well, I like that you came here because I think we should talk to Visit Pittsburgh and the people that do the marketing. I think the slogan, Pittsburgh, where people from Buffalo go for vacation, I think that has a nice little ring to it.
Yeah, that is a step up for us. I'm a native Clevelander, so there's that aspect of it too. I have low expectations, but no, it was great. And as I said, I almost took a job in Pittsburgh about, what would it have been, 15 years ago or so. I love the city. I'm joking around because because it's easy, but it's but Pittsburgh is Pittsburgh's a legit city. I mean, that is like you can tell the money that's in Pittsburgh. And I know it went through the hard times. I grew up in the Warren Youngstown area outside of Cleveland, the high unemployment rate and the steel industry, and that affect Buffalo too, and the whole thing. But it was just always a draw to me when I was in high school and I was able to drive, going to Pirates games, and I'd just make the trip, and just the vibe and there's a vibrancy. Things happen in that city downtown, unlike they do in Buffalo, as Jenna can attest. Is like, and Cleveland's the same way too. I mean, just people live in Pittsburgh, the city. There's people on the street. There's stuff going on. And I don't know. I always wonder what would have happened if I would have taken that job, which I was actually offered, and I turned it down. But
we could have been best friends or neighbors or something like that. Not to mention all the other good things you said about Pittsburgh. The accent is also known as really attractive. Women love it, which is why Jenna was really attracted to me. Is, it's like one of the, Boston accent, big and muscular, whatever, like, New York, or like the charm of a Southern accent. But there's nothing quite like that Yinzer accent. I say, Jenna, it's time to wash the dishes. And yeah, then she's like, this is my guy. But
that
Red
heavy
up.
West Virginia influence is also to be respected and acknowledged.
that's right. Well, let's jump in and start talking about some football, Tim. And the AFC is a great mystery and a puzzle. It seems like there's no dominant team, and a lot of the teams that typically are competing for playoff contention seem to have a lot of warts. So, where do the Bills fall within this category of contender or pretender in a division or in a conference that's been hard to kind of sort out this year?
I would say I'm leaning more towards pretender right now. And this, of course, as you know, and you're covering the team on the beat. The NFL is a game to game vibe, unlike the other sports where you can settle in, even basketball and hockey, but really baseball. But all those other three sports, it's a trend sport. You get a vibe for a team after a number of games, and the ebbs and the flows are much more like going down a lazy river. Whereas with the NFL, it is just back and forth pendulum, and every game really sets the tone for the team, but also for the market. The way that people live and breathe and the mood that they're in. And so, and I'm guessing, Pittsburgh's a prime example of that because it's a team that you can probably get to a pretty, depression's probably too strong of a word, but the fear or just the dread that, is this the year where they finally missed the playoffs? Is this the year or should we do the hard reset? And from a game to game basis, you're constantly weighing that. Well, the Bills have been on this great ride for 5 straight years of winning the AFC East championship. And heading into this year, I was reminded by a friend of mine earlier today about this stat. It was my favorite offseason stat. The Bills were the only team in the entire league that heading into the season, their preseason spread for every game, they were favored. So the 31 other teams had a game or two or several in which they were going to be the underdog. The Bills were favored for every game. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to go 17-0, but they also had the best odds to win their division of any team in the league. And here they are. One of the most obvious things that you see is that they are not going to catch the New England Patriots. And there are still, 6 games left. And they're clearly inferior to the Patriots at the moment. They've been beaten by really bad teams, the Atlanta Falcons, the Miami Dolphins, Houston Texans. As elite as that defense is, the Houston Texans, especially with Davis Mills at quarterback, strike you as a fairly pedestrian team. Yes, they can beat you, and they've been beating teams. And when C.J. Stroud comes back, they're going to be fine. But the Bills were favored to win that game too on Thursday, and they lost it. So they just have this feeling of they can lose to any week more than you would. That feeling of this team can't be beat this week. This opponent, it doesn't matter if it's the Chiefs. I'd go into games, and I even feel it as a journalist. You'd be like, how are these guys going to lose? I mean, they're humming. The Josh Allen is in the groove, and the defense is playing well enough, and James Cook and all these other things. And now, third and long, you just have this feeling, well, they're probably going to convert this anyway, and all that's gone. All that and you feel it. You feel it in the locker room. You feel it, just at the games. The confidence has eroded quite a bit. So, it's. I would say that there is a lot of concern among Bills fans heading into Pittsburgh this week, regardless of who the quarterback is. I know that they're saying that Aaron Rodgers is probably going to play, or it looks favorable based on what Mike Tomlin said. But this is a team that is really vulnerable right now and going through it.
What's the biggest reason behind some of their warts? Like, what is their biggest problem this season in terms of why they're sitting where they are right now?
Combination of bad receiver. Well, I'm hesitant to say that. Ineffective receivers. They're not good enough. Khalil Shakir as the slot receiver has been able to do some things. Dalton Kincaid as a tight end has been their most productive target, but he's been hurt. He's got a hamstring injury. I don't know if he's going to play this week. And so the complexion of this offense, even though it's pretty much the same guys who were on the team last year, and those who they did lose, like Mac Hollins to the New England Patriots, he was, more of a special teamer, role guy. He would come up and have a big game here or there. But it seems like losing him has been devastating, and that shouldn't be the case. And Matt Collins is a journeyman, special teams first, fourth receiver, second type guy. Offensive line fully intact. Nobody's hurt for 3 years running or whatever it's been. James Cook is having a really good year. Josh Allen has been healthy, but the receivers aren't getting open. They're not getting separation. They're not winning contested catches. So that's that part of it. But there have been injuries galore all over the place, and it's really hurt their continuity within units, and defensively, tackling has been poor. Stopping the run has been a problem even when healthy. So it's the other thing too that really gets glossed over because it's easy to kind of forget, because you want to look at personnel, or you want to look at certain things that can be helped in the draft type things when you're analyzing a roster, what can be helped at the trade deadline, free agency, fill in the blank. But they're not getting the takeaways that they got last year. They were otherworldly in taking the ball away last year, and that's not something you can count on. You should count on heading into a season of 50-50, right? And hopefully you end up getting lopsided one way or the other. But recovering fumbles is a coin flip. Josh Allen's not real. He's throwing a few more interceptions this year, but they're not getting those takeaways that they got in loads last year. And so you're not getting the ball back as readily. Then you find yourself scoring 12 points against the Houston Texans.
So, one thing that's interesting to me is James Cook seems like he's having a really good season. One of the best running backs in the league, one of the most efficient running backs in the league. But yet Josh Allen's sack numbers are really high. And we went into the Jenna Harner stats and information department. And Jenna, you have some good stats to give us. And then I have a question off of that.
Yeah, this is so fascinating to me. And this number has not been adjusted, or I haven't found the adjusted number following the Texans game where Josh Allen was sacked, I believe 7 times. Was that right? 8.
7 in the
times.
second
Dear
half.
Goodness. Oh gosh. But a season
TJ
ago,
Watt is not looking forward to this game at all.
Not
with
in
the
potential.
potential
Alex Highsmith.
and with an injured right tackle on the Bills. Other than that, I'm sure he's dreading it.
I'm sure, totally, absolutely dreading it. But Josh Allen, his sack rate on third downs last season, his MVP season, he was sacked on third down 4.4%. This season, before the Texans game, 14.8%. That is just a massive jump there to me. So, Mike, that was the Jenna Harner stats and information department.
So you see on
That's
one side
number.
an offensive line that seems to be opening holes and creating opportunities for the ball carrier, yet Josh Allen is getting sacked at an extremely high rate. Is it something within the offensive line? Are they stronger on the interior than they are at tackle? Or is it more so Josh Allen, getting himself in bad situations, holding on to the football longer than he should?
It's a couple of things that I can think of. It is holding on to the ball because his receivers aren't getting open. So he has to wait a little bit longer. And Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator, because Josh Allen is such an elite athlete and great runner and hard to bring down, you may have a quarterback that you've seen once or twice in which to have worn the black and gold, in which they say, you got to make a guy miss. We need to send extra guys out into routes because you're a big boy and you're going to have to make the first guy miss because you're really good at it, and you're going to have to bail us out pretty much on a pass-by-pass basis. So what Joe Brady did in that last game, and I don't have the stats in front of me, I wish I did, but even against those great edge rushers, Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson, they just blocked with 5 guys. They didn't do a lot of chipping. They didn't, bring in extra help. It was pretty much Josh, make a guy miss. And that's how you end up getting hit 12 times, 8 of them sacks. And those don't count the runs. When he stepped, the one where he got hurt, and see the way he was kicking his legs and writhing around on the turf early in the game, it looked like, well, that's it for him, at least today, maybe longer, because you don't see Josh Allen do that. But that was a run play in which he stepped up in the pocket, tried to tuck it and go. Will Anderson just engulfed him from behind. So those are hits that don't count as QB hits technically. So he took a beating, and the week and a half is necessary, I think, for him. And he has shown some happy feet this year. So that is something that I think if you're at the game, you're watching, where you can see this on TV. It's not like it's happening in the defensive backfield and it's off camera. But yeah, you watch Josh Allen's feet, and you can have a pretty good sense as to what his headspace is based on how nervous he looks from the waist down.
Now, defensively, of course, this team, I feel like I look at the injury report when all of my Buffalo people are tweeting things out, and it's just been so injury ridden, this defense. What is this defense going to look like when they come here to Pittsburgh on Sunday? Are there guys they anticipate getting back? Are there key guys that are already going to be out? Is there part of like a mixed bag here where it's going to be wait and see how the week goes and kind of get more of their status as the week goes along situation here?
I think they're kind of healthy. Again, the week and a half helps. Terrell Bernard, though, he had the arm injury on Thursday night. He's the middle linebacker and captain, very important player in Sean McDermott's defense. But he had an ankle injury in I get the weeks mixed up, the Atlanta game. So that was week 6. He had an ankle injury that he was really struggling to get back from. And he was starting to come around and play like the guy that they need him to be. And then he suffers this arm injury in Houston. That looked like a season ender with the way, not only, how it happened, but also his reaction to it. He was carted off, ruled out immediately, shows up on the sideline in a sling during the game. That's usually not a good sign. But they're now saying week to week, so he's not going to be out there. However, Shaq Thompson, the veteran from Carolina, has been really good this year. Now, he's older. He was viewed as a guy who was a spare part maybe coming into the season, run defense specialist. But with Terrell Bernard hurt over that period of time that I was talking about with the ankle injury, he really played well. And there are a lot of people who are wondering if this is not an upgrade, is to have Shaq Thompson out there and in that role and playing alongside Matt Milano, who's also not been great. Now, he's a former All-Pro. There have been some guys are aging out on the Bills defense. Taron Johnson, the nickel corner, one of the best in the league, or at least you used to be able to say that. He's having an off year. Christian Benford, their top cornerback, their boundary cornerback, he just got a big contract. He's not aging out, but he's not really playing up to his contract extension. Jordan Poyer's playing safety. He looked like he was washed up 2 years ago, and he's been serviceable because he's healthy and he's helping out the younger Cole Bishop who's next to him. So he's been a kind of a security blanket, not doing anything stupid type thing, but he's not gonna, with his physical ability, he's not going to be chasing dudes down from behind or, it's been patchwork for sure. But I think for the most part, we didn't get an injury report because the Bills played Thursday and they took off. They've been off, so we'll get our first injury report or talk to Sean McDermott for the first time on Wednesday.
Now, sticking with the defense for a second, it seems like the Bills are one of the teams that plays nickel a lot, and like they almost base in nickel. And I'm curious stylistically what that's going to mean against a Pittsburgh Steelers team that uses 2 and 3 tight ends more than basically any other team. Are they a team that's comfortable playing their base personnel? And how do they match up against a team that's just so tight end centric?
This year's Bills are a little different. They were base, like you said. This year they're going more to a 4-3 base, but fourth and short in that game on Thursday, it was Taron Johnson, the nickel corner, who got run over. He stepped into the hole, he squared up to the running back and just got dragged for 3 or 4 yards. So they did have their nickel defense out there in a short yardage situation. So they've made some curious decisions with that setup, but you will see them do that. And with Terrell Bernard out, I think, Shaq, I have to be careful because they just signed Shaq Lawson. Did I say Shaq Lawson earlier?
You said Shaq Thompson, but I was also going to ask about that because that's a fun little, the Shaq duo, I guess.
Yeah, it's fun in that it's kind of funny because Bills fans are sick of the front office constantly bringing back the guys who they've cut. There are, I don't know, 7 or 8 of these guys, it seems like, that they've said goodbye to, and they keep bringing back because they just feel comfortable with them. And does that necessarily mean that's good? I mean, can't you find somebody better? Now, here it is, middle of November. If you're probably any good, you're already on a roster. But the Bills really do seem to lean into that. Well, he knows the system. We're comfortable with him in the building. We know he's a good guy type thing. And it just gets to kind of be a running joke here in Western New York that the Bills keep dipping into their alumni to fill out the roster.
All the old friends.
That's right.
What matchup in this game are you really honing in on? What is going to be kind of like the key matchup between these two teams that really can ultimately decide who has some sort of leg up in the AFC, although God knows what's going to happen because the ACR is just so wonky.
Yeah, I think it's whoever lines up against TJ Watt is going to have a long day. Either Spencer Brown is, if he's good enough to go, he's hurt. I don't know. You hold him out if that's what you got. If you're going to be going up against TJ Watt, Ryan Vandemark finished the game. Didn't look that good in Houston. Did they bring somebody up from the practice squad? I need to take a gander here just to make sure. Yeah, TJ Watt. I don't know if you're allowed to talk about this, but look at your TJ Watt props.
Yeah, I think I feel like
sports betting is legal in Pennsylvania, right?
It is legal in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Check your TJ Watt props.
Our dog Zeke, who has a segment on this podcast called Zeke's Picks.
How is he? Is he doing well? Is he making money for
Zeke? Zeke was the first one on the Colts. We were doing the picks and we picked against the Colts, and when he did that, Zeke slapped Jenna's arm and was like, "No, hell no, I'm picking the Colts in this one."
He's a visionary.
He was the first one on it. Zeke knows. He knows ball. We have to leave the TV on when we leave so that he can monitor his bets and everything. So he will appreciate that prop, that advice. But the weird thing to me is I think that the Bills are a tier above the Steelers, but I actually kind of think that this game, the Steelers match up reasonably well against the Bills because you mentioned it, they're on the backup right tackle. The Steelers' whole defense is predicated upon pressure. You look at all of their stats, one of the only things that they're really good at is sacking the quarterback. So I feel like that benefits them. Then one of the biggest question marks for the Steelers has been their secondary this season, miscommunications and schematic questions about whether they're running the right types of coverages. This doesn't really look like a Bills, offense and receiving core that's going to challenge them vertically very much. So I kind of like the matchup for the Steelers, even though I think it's going to be a tough game. My one question is, how about just the Bills defense versus Steelers offense? The Steelers offense seems to have a pretty clear identity and limitations. They basically want to get the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hands as quick as possible, throw the ball as short as possible, and allow DK Metcalf to create yards after the catch. How do the Bills match up against a team that is going to be getting rid of the ball quickly, going to be throwing a ton of underneath routes, and not really going to be trying to attack downfield very much at all?
Well, Shaq Thompson's that's not his forte. He's a run stopper, as I mentioned before, although he has been serviceable. So that's a problem. Matt Milano, who is really good at that, has been a liability a lot this season. He's just, he's hurt a lot. The accumulation of injuries, even when healthy, a guy like Matt Milano is always, dealing with something or trying to overcome something. The safeties, as I mentioned, you're probably looking at, Jordan Poyer needing to have a bigger game. And I just stressed, that he's eroded as a guy in his mid-30s. So, but maybe you see some younger guys like Jordan Hancock, rookie. You might see him at safety a little bit more. Yeah, it's hard to say because this defense has been in such a state of flux with injuries. Joey Bosa, who was somebody that heading into the season, you're thinking, man, if they can just get 10 good games out of him, or get him ready for the playoffs. I mean, that's the book on Joey Bosa, right? Is that he's always hurt. Well, he's been healthy, but he's been playing hurt, and he's been kind of invisible the last couple of games. Greg Rousseau, the other edge rusher, AJ Epinesa, these guys have not produced much. So, like you're saying, it's the offense is designed, as you're saying, to get the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hand quickly. Then we're probably not going to see a lot of pressure. You're going to see maybe the Bills do a little bit more interior defensive line play. But it's hard to say. You were talking before about the Bills and the expectations and James Cook and the matchups to look for. The thing that's been strange, and I've been saying it for a few weeks, I've even mentioned it to a couple of players, and they laugh at me, but I'm okay with that. I say it because I'm not ashamed. But I said I think it's gotten to a point where defensive coordinators want Josh Allen to beat him. They take James Cook away. As long as the Bills have that diversity in their offense of having to stop James Cook, then Josh Allen's that much more dangerous. If you take away James Cook and say, all right, Josh Allen, beat us. Now, he's the reigning MVP, one of the greatest players to ever wear a uniform in NFL history, and that's not hyperbole. And you're just pretty much saying, go ahead, Josh Allen, try to beat us. Now, you would never say that to Patrick Mahomes or some of these other guys, but because they have the weapons. Everybody knows that Josh Allen's kind of naked right now. And it's like, all right, unless you're going to run it, Josh, or do, hero ball, which is maybe getting to that point in the season where they have to unleash him to do that to win games, then I think that's an interesting aspect to this matchup is whether or not the Steelers just say, go ahead, Josh, try it.
It is going to be
I could definitely see that. Sorry, I could definitely see that happening because the Steelers talk so much about how they need to stop the run. And it all starts with, if they stop the run, they get opponents in one-dimensional situations, they let the edge rushers pin their ears back. That's when this defense is at its best. So I really think that will be a huge part of the Steelers' game plan. I think that's a huge key to the game, is just making sure that James Cook doesn't wreck things and keep the Bills on schedule and set up those short third down situations. I think that's going to be the biggest key. I think at the end of the day, if you look at it and James Cook is over 100 yards, the Bills probably won. If James Cook is under 100 yards, there's a good chance that the Steelers were able to come out victorious. But
it feels also to me insane that the last time the Bills played in Pittsburgh, I was still working in Buffalo, because that was the Sunday night game that decided everything. Both teams were, I think, around the 8-6.
You're talking
mark.
about the Duck Hodges season, the Duck season, the best season to be a Pittsburgh Steeler fan or follow the team, because everything was house money. I was watching that game from a bar somewhere in Western Canada, because I was still covering the Penguins, and Canadians are just so polite. They kept the bar open so that I could watch it. And then they're also so polite, they kept giving me shots of whiskey, but they're also crazy people and you can't drink with them. So ultimately it was a brutal experience.
Whiskey with a Y in Canada.
That's right.
That's how they spelled it.
Get it right.
But that also was the game. And I'm glad you brought that up, Jenna, because it does remind me of how things have changed with the Bills. The Bills used to be a team that would just shove it down your throat and gleefully run up the score, throw it to a defensive tackle out of, a goal line formation, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. They were having fun. That was Brian Dable, and that was to an extent last year. They stopped having fun with Ken Dorsey, and they haven't been having much fun this year in the second full year with Joe Brady. But when Brian Dable was the offensive coordinator, that was the Renegade game, as it's known in Buffalo, in which right after Renegade, the Bills had been drilling all week. They played nothing but Renegade. The players told me after the game that they hated it to the point where they fell in love with it. It was just put in there as kind of like a psyops, and that they knew that as soon as they heard Renegade, they were going deep. And of course, they do hit a 40-yarder, and then a play after that, they score a touchdown. And that Bills is gone. Now that's been the case of them for the last 3-4 years. The fun Bills, rub your nose in it, the hunter, not the hunted. and now they're playing like they're prey, and it's just a totally different vibe and that game really is uh, is a is a snapshot of that, of how it used to be and how fans wish it was again.
I'll never forget. It was Matt Barkley with the massive coat, and he's whipping it around as all
Right?
the Steelers fans are whipping their terrible towels. And again, I was on the Buffalo side covering the Bills at this point. So it's just crazy to see how things have come full circle in that way. And we're all here talking now. Tim, thank you so much for your time, for your expertise. Please let our listeners and followers know where they can find you, where they can follow you, and where they can read all of your work.
It's at by Tim Graham. That's BY Tim Graham. BI Tim Graham is a different account. And you can get me on all of them, all the majors, Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram. I don't do much there, but I'm going to start, I think, Facebook, whatevers. And at The Athletic, the Bills coverage there. And I have a podcast, Tim Graham and Friends, in which it's Buffalo centric. But I don't know. I'll take requests. So if anybody wants to reach out and say, hey, talk about
Pittsburgh dinner locations.
Right. Tyler Matakevich, your favorite Tyler Matakevich memory. I'll be happy to fill him in.
I love it. I love it. Well, Tim, thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us this week on the Yinziders. We will see you next week. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.